So it seems like I'm finally in a position to start styling this button component. So with that in mind, I'm going to create a new file called btn.css. And again, I'm sort of pretending that this is my front-end component that I'm going to pull in to the main style sheet. You wouldn't really use @import statements in a live kind of production situation like this directly from the style sheet, because it's going to incur a whole bunch of different requests. It's going to go and get the main style sheet, and then that's going to spill out into a bunch of different requests that all need to be pulled in the right order for our styles. But for the purposes of this demonstration, it's fine to do, and it gives us our source files are all broken up in a way that matches the mental model I'm trying to use, so that's okay. And if we wanted to make it into something that was functional in a production environment, then we could have a task runner that would take those import statements and build them into something that was a single style sheet. That's not a problem. So we've got button CSS being pulled into our style sheet. I need to change the root element of the component, because it's not a heading, it's an anchor tag, and I need to give this a class btn so that that's referenced from the style sheet, and I'm going to give it an href as well, because if you don't give it an href and it's an anchor tag, it will not behave the way you expect. You won't get underlines and things like that. Alright, there we go. It's looking like a link now, which is what it's supposed to be. It's 8 pixels because we've set font family to 8 pixels. So I want to go into my button component and we'll set the font size to, well, let's see, let's start with 2 rem. That brings that up. So 2 rem, 2 times 8 is obviously 16. Actually, if we look in the design, Control mouse wheel to zoom that out there, Control Z, space, and then use my mouse to reposition that, and then Control mouse wheel to zoom in on the component there. If I click right into that piece of copy or micro copy, the size is actually 15 pixels, which I find that annoying when I'm working in 8 pixel RAMs, but it happens. So on this occasion, I'm not going to surreptitiously make it 16. I'm going to use this ratio, which is 1.875 rem, and I happen to know that that will give me 15 pixels. There we go. We can see font size 15 pixels, red hat display. Okay, so that's pixel perfect from the designer's perspective. And now the main part of making this button component is just going through and identifying the ways in which the design differs from the styling I've got and making the changes. So let's start with the background color, which seems like the most obvious difference. Background color, and we can use our var. I believe it's theme 400. To make the text visible, color. Theme white. We need to get rid of that underline, which we would never do on an inline anchor element, but given that this is styled as a call to action and is very obviously a click target, I think it's okay to remove it. With text decoration none. We need to add padding around the button, and if we look at the design, that's 15 pixels again, which fortunately I can just use the same ratio as before, 1.875 rem, and we'll give it some border radius. Now if I zoom in here, border radius is 11 pixels, and it's now looking, you know, reasonably close, I think, to what it's supposed to be. We need to give the font weight 900 because it's actually black in the design. There we go. And I just put that under font size to keep the font properties together. In fact, I'll probably move text decoration up to be there too. And it's a bit crowded up at the top of the screen. I can't see the whole component, so I'm going to go back into our styles and give the HTML some padding as well. 2 rems just to make it visible. So we're getting there, and if I examine this now, there's this weird thing that happens where the padding sort of exceeds the container there. So we've got 2 rems of padding, but the button's going outside it, and then we've got this gap, so it's not flush to the side the way I would expect it to be. And that's because the A tag by default is an inline element, so I'm going to change the display to block. And when we save that, this now expands to fill the whole of the horizontal width that's available. And that's fine, because that's what I want my components to do. I want them to expand to fill up as much space as they want, because the way that I'm approaching this is by making the control of the width, that's going to be the concern of the layout that surrounds this. So that has highlighted another thing we need to do, which is text align, and again I'll group that with the text properties. Text align center, and we're getting close. There's a couple more things I want to do before I'm ready to leave this component behind, and the first of those is the shadows. Now this is a bit tricky, and I think this would be really tricky without Figma to work from. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to do this by eye from a JPEG. But there's actually 2 shadows there. The first, you can see under effects, drop shadow, and we've got the properties there, X, Y, blur, so it's 0, 4, 4, and then just a black at 25%. So let's go ahead and pop in some box shadow, 0x, Y 4 pixels. In fact, let's make that rem while we're here, so 0.5 rem. Blur of 4, so 0.5 rem again. Spread of 0, so we don't need to put that property in, and we'll add the color, which is here as a hex. It's 0 in hex and then 25% opacity. That's a reasonably easy one to convert, so we'll just do 3 lots of 0 for black, and then the alpha channel we can represent as 0.25. So there we've got our first box shadow, and then the second box shadow is much harder to see, and it's actually harder to find even in the Figma file. It took me a little while to look around. So if I click here, we've got group 6, which is our button, and actually hidden down here at the bottom is another rectangle, and that's where the drop shadow is. That's where the second drop shadow is, and that's using the same value as our as the color of the background, but it's got an opacity of 19.03%, which is super specific. I think I'm gonna just leave that at 19% for simplicity's sake. So I need to do x0, y20 pix, which is what in rem? 2 lots of 8 plus 4 for 20 pixels. We've got a blur of 20 pixels, so 2.5 rem again for that, and spread 0, so we don't need to include that property. And then the color is going to be var Oh, now here's where it gets tricky, because we've got our var, we've got our color just written as an RGB value, so I'm gonna just copy that and change the alpha channel to 0.19. And there, it's hard to see, but it's there. The drop shadow, same as we want it. Now I think what I'm going to do to just tidy this up a little bit is take this first box shadow property, take the whole thing, cut it out, go into my theme and create a new custom CSS property. Let's call it shadow small. That's our small shadow, and then by the same token we'll use shadow large, and we'll add the second box shadow. Now I can use those whole properties together, comma separated, so we get both shadows, and that's cleaner. I think I can reuse those in other parts of the design. Good. So in terms of the mobile first approach for this particular component, I think that's done. But as I said in the intro, we're going to look at the responsive aspects of this for each component at a time and try and get that responsiveness baked into the component itself. So if I take this off of the mobile view, we have something on the desktop version that we don't have in the mobile view, and that is hover state. So if we move down here and zoom in on the same component, we can see that when it's hovered, it has to take this color 766 CF1, so that's 118. Let's have a look and see what that matches on here. 118, so it's color 500. Back to button, and we will create a new class. BTN hover, background color, test that out. Yep. Doesn't look like, have I picked the wrong color there? Let's see. 500 I think I was supposed to pick. Yeah, that's more like it. But it's a bit stark the way you hover it just flashes straight up. So I'm going to add some transitions onto that. When it transitions in, I want it to last a little bit longer than when it transitions out. That's one of the things I've learned from UX. The transition property is background color. I want it to last 0.3 seconds, and I want it to ease out. I'm going to copy that, because while that will work for hovering in, you see, when I take the hover away, it disappears straight away. I need to put onto the original class transition, and I'm going to make that a little bit shorter, because when people are dismissing an effect, they want it to just go away. And similarly, I want that effect to be a bit more noticeable when it begins than when it ends. Once it's started and the person's got the idea of what's happening, it should just nick off as quickly as possible. But I think what I'm going to do again is I'm going to take that duration and the ease effect, and I'm going to put those into custom variables as well. So let's call that transition out. And obviously I want to also have transition in. Okay, nice. And that is the button component done.